All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Meet Fit and Lean. If you're new, please hit that like and subscribe button. Oh, wait, let me start over. Welcome to Meet Fit and Lean. There we go. If you're new, please hit that like and subscribe button. Folks, I want to talk about something that the Lord brought to my attention. And I was just scrolling through my video feed, and an interesting colored gentleman happened to do a video on the spirit of gluttony. And he wasn't even fat, but he was talking about how he looked forward to KFC, and he was thinking about getting his chicken and fried chicken and stuff, and all these things. Like he was saying, like he was looking forward to food too much. He was thinking about food, and he had never repented of gluttony. And I was thinking, in terms of the way I look at food, I realized that I look forward to food too much, and I use it as a form of escapism. So ever since I was a young child, and going back to age 11 or 12, I was always looking at the next meal and thinking about ordering from Domino's, or getting a pizza, or ordering, crab meat sandwich from the local deli or something like that. I was always thinking about my next meal, and never occurred to me that that's a form of gluttony. And I always thought, well, I'm not a glutton. I'm not shoveling piles of food in every chance I get. You're seeing people on YouTube's doing their mukbangs and all these things. Are like, oh my goodness, I'm not one of them. You get this kind of a haughtiness about it because you think, oh, well, I'm not a glutton, but you realize you have a problem. Gluttony is really making an idol out of food, and I don't realize how much I do this. Every time my birthday rolls around, I'm thinking about where I want to go out to dinner, what cake and ice cream, and what kind of cake I'd like to have, real specialty cake with, lots of icing and fudge and all that sort of thing. And I'm thinking about food, like every time I go on a vacation, I'm thinking about where I'm going to eat, where I'm going to eat on vacation. So I didn't realize that that's sort of a form of gluttony. And gluttony can be very sneaky, folks. You can think that you're not doing it, and it sneaks in. So what the Lord showed me to do was repent of a spirit of gluttony. Now, you may not have a spirit of gluttony. You may have a spirit of lust. You may have a spirit of criticism. These so-called Karens, a lot of them have a critical spirit. So that's what it is. And so actually, I repented of the spirit of gluttony, and lately, I have to admit, I've been having a lot easier time with my diet. I'm not feeling tempted to eat a lot of foods that aren't good for me. Now, I did have some Lucky Charms on St. Patrick's Day, folks, but everybody does that, right? And I just feel like I'm really coming along. I'm really making progress in my journey into becoming less focused on food. Because my mother, Lord rest her soul, she would always praise me to the hilt. I'll tell you all a story. When I was a young child, I almost died of gastroenteritis. I had to be rushed to the hospital. My mother was very upset. She called the doctor a quack. But luckily they saved me. They put me on intravenous fluids and pumped my... Well, actually, I got it because they pumped my stomach because my mother thought I'd swallowed some bleach. So she took me to the hospital, and they pumped my stomach, and then I got a staph infection, folks, a staph infection. And then I ended up in the hospital again for gastroenteritis, and this was in 1980 when I was about a year old, less than a year old. And my mother saved my life because the doctors told her to wait, and she said, no, I'm not waiting. She took me into the hospital and saved my life. But I actually got very thin. Can you imagine a thin Mead? Nobody can, right? Well, actually, between the ages of 2 and 4, I was underweight. I was very skinny, a very skinny child, and my mother would encourage me to eat. And anytime I would eat, she would just jump for joy and call all our relatives, say how well I'm eating, And it became, of course, a habit where I just became dependent on food, and I looked forward to eating because I got praise for eating. And then by the time I was 8, my mother said, I need to put you on a diet. You don't want to end up like the kid from Stand By Me. You remember that movie? Remember the kid on Stand By Me who ate a bunch of pies at the pie eating contest, and then he vomits and throws up all over everybody, and then they throw up all over everybody else, and it's a big old mess. She thought it was going to end up like that. Actually, when my mother was pregnant with me, the doctor said I'd be a Mr. Potato Head, but that's another story. But anyway, folks, getting back to the subject matter, I think that programmed my mind into overeating, and then the spirit of gluttony took over, And then my mother died when I was 11, and I was a total mess through high school. Didn't have any girlfriends, didn't have any dates. I was very much an independent person. I'm really more of a Sigma male. I'm a Sigma male, Sigma male type. But anyway, folks, I do have a problem with gluttony, and I admit that, but it's not like what we think. We think of gluttony as constantly eating. You're constantly eating. But I don't do that. I thought, well, I don't do that. But I do overeat. But it's just little things like you're having that second helping of something. You're, reaching for the bread. My grandmother said, you would lose weight if you just don't eat bread. And this was before the carb diet, or no carb thing. But that's what they taught her when she was young. They told her that bread made you fat. And she was born in 1918, and they told her that. So maybe they're onto something. But anyway, the spirit of gluttony is something that I have repented of, and I think that if you address the weight loss as a spiritual issue, which it indeed is, then I think that will make it easier to lose weight. If you're not addressing the spiritual issue of weight loss, folks, it can be very difficult to lose weight. And this is a very enlightening journey for me. This is very cathartic. I was not expecting that I had so much under there, so much years of built up frustration and psychological issues and spiritual issues that have built up inside of me and were just ready to explode. And all these things over the years have just happened. I just feel that now it's all bubbling up to the surface. And one of the things I have is gluttony. Well, and people say, you're a glutton. I'm a glutton for punishment because I make these videos, right? And all people do is criticize me and berate me. But I have to share my journey because this is helping me. And I think that, and this is for my prayer, for prayer, and I'm doing prayer and fasting. And I did a lot of fasting, and this is what the Lord showed me, that I have a spirit of gluttony. So I just want to address that because a lot of people don't. And if you're struggling with your weight or something, gluttony is really lust. You're lusting not after a woman. I'm lusting after food. It's so bad that if I saw a very attractive female, I would probably want a cheeseburger instead, cheeseburger, or chocolate cake. Say, oh yeah, I see her over there. She's wearing her yoga pants and a little tight crop top, and she's young and pretty. But I want to go to McDonald's, get myself a cheeseburger, some fries. That's the problem, folks. Is your mind is just warped. It's like pornography. But it's food. It's food. So overcome the spirit of gluttony, repent, and let it go. And this is the Lent season, right, folks? So we're in the Lent season. We're learning our spiritual things. So just want to share that with everybody. Hope that was enlightening for y'all. Hope it brought you to a place where you can find what you need to let go of. So thank y'all for watching. Go to my website at meetskeltonsplace.com. And remember, folks, say a prayer for someone special today. Bye-bye.